योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम् गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुर्गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम. So today we begin with the next Sanyama covered in Sutra 3.18, which says Samskara Sakshatkaranat Purvajati Jnanam. So what does this mean? So when a yogi does Sanyama, so Sakshatkaranam means Sakshatkaraha. Sakshatkara means direct perception. In this context, it refers to yogaja pratyaksham, the direct yogic perception, direct yogic realization, which is Sanyama. So this is among the various Sanyamas discussed in the Vibhuti Pada. This is the third among those. So when there is Sanyama done or Sakshatkaranam done, on what? On Samskaras. Samskaras, as we have seen, are the impressions, the subliminal impressions as it is referred to in English, that reside in the Chitta and arise whenever there is any action, thought, etc. Any vritti will generate the corresponding samskara. So when a yogi does sanyama on the samskaras, there is a certain siddhi. So what is the siddhi? This sutra says purvajati jnanam. So there is jnanam, knowledge of purvajati. Purvajati means the previous lifetimes of the yogi, the previous births, the previous lifespan, etc., or previous incarnations as it is referred to. So this is the next Sayyama, Samskara Sakshatkaranat Purvajati Jnanam, the next Sayyama and the next Siddhi. So this is Sutra 3.18, and now we will look at the Bhashya. What does Vyasa have to say? So Vyasa begins, as usual, by giving us some information, further background and context. As we have also discussed earlier, in the Vibhuti Pada, the various Sanyamas are given. And the reason was also provided. That says, Upatta Sarva Sadhanani Yena Yogina. So whichever yogi has attained all the sadhanas, ashtangas, etc., he has a bubutsa, he has a wish to know various things. And therefore the Vibhuti says the Sanyama on what leads to what kind of knowledge. And so therefore here the knowledge is Purvajati Jnanam. So, but we have also seen that along with that, as and when each Sanyama is discussed, a certain background, a certain Siddhanta is also explained in the Sutra and the Bhashya combined. Just like we saw a little bit of the Vyakarana Shastra covered whenever in the previous Sanyama, and the Siddhi was said to be that the language of all the types of beings in creation one comes to know. But while that was being explained, a certain background of the Vyakarana Shastra was provided on language and grammar. Similarly here, when one touches on the topic of samskara, it's a very interesting, very fascinating account of this is given, which is also followed by a sort of an anecdote which will come, which is really very beautiful to go through. So now Vyasa begins by saying, Dvaye khalu ami samskaraha smrutiklesha hetavaha vasana rupaha vipaka hetavaha dharma dharma rupaha. Now this sentence itself provides us a very interesting insight. So Vyasa says, okay, there are two types of samskaras. One are of the nature of vasana rupaha. What are they? They are smriti klesha hetavaha. So they are the cause of certain types of smriti and certain types of klesha. So the mental tendencies that arise, mental memories, mental tendencies, mental wants, likes and dislikes, etc., are coming from a certain one of the two types of samskaras that are called vasana rupaha here. So they are referred to as vasanas. They generate tendencies, likes and dislikes, or the inclination, disposition of the sort of the mental faculty. The other one is dharma dharma rupaha. So the samskaras of the nature of dharma and adharma. So the samskaras have arisen from actions which are of the nature of punya and papa, meritorious deeds and non-meritorious deeds, which is dharma and adharma, have led to certain samskaras. And what do they cause? Vipaka hetavaha. They lead to a fructification of the dharma and adharma, and therefore a person in a certain lifetime goes through different life conditions which may be pleasing and helpful or contrary and tormenting. So the samskaras, there is a very interesting division of them, one leading to mental dispositions, mental tendencies, and sort of the likes and dislikes or the very nature of a person. The other one leading to life circumstances due to their vipaka, their fructification. So dvaye khalu ami samskaraha smriti klesha hetavah vasana rupah vipaka hetavah dharma dharma rupah. So now Vyasa continues, he says, te purva bhavabhi samskritaha परिणाम चेष्टा निरोध शक्तिर्जीवन धर्मवत् अपरिदृष्टाः चित्त धर्माः. So further information about samskaras. How did they arise? This is te, those samskaras are purva bhava abhisamskritaha. So they have arisen from the previous existences, previous lifetimes, things done previously. So purva bhava abhisamskritaha, generated or created or arisen through previous actions and previous activities, previous lifetimes. And how do they reside in the chitta? What is the sort of the structure or what is the form in which they reside in the chitta? So it says parinama cheshta nirodha shakti jivana dharmavad aparidrishtaha chitta dharmaha. So this is a reference back to, if you remember, the Bhashya on Sutra 3.15, which was Kramanyatvam Parinamanyatve Hetuhu. That was the Sutra. And in the Bhashya, we had seen there was a very interesting description that was said. Okay, we have seen Chitta Vrittis, etc. But those are the visible aspects of a Chitta. But there are other aspects of a Chitta, which are 7, which it was said, te cha saptaiva bhavanti anumanena prapita vastu matra sadbhavaha. Through reasoning, we determine that there are 7 types of things that constitute the chitta, and if you were to describe the chitta in those terms, there are 7 aspects that you would have to describe. And it has, if you remember that in Bhashya 3.15, there was a verse quoted in the end that said Nirodha Dharma Samskaraha Parinamotha Jivanam Cheshta Shaktischa Chittasya Dharma Darshana Varjitaha. Darshana Varjita, not directly seen, but there are these Chitta Dharmas and there are 7. And one of those 7 was Samskara. And therefore it was Nirodha Dharma Samskaraha. So those 3, Nirodha Dharma Samskara Parinama Jivanam Cheshta Shakti. So here that same thing is reiterated where Vyasa says Parinama Cheshta Nirodha Shakti Jivana Dharmavat, like these 6 Aparidrishtas Chitta Dharmaha. Samskaras are also Chitta Dharmas that are not seen but are to be inferred, and therefore it was said the Anumanena Praptaha. So through reasoning they are to be inferred. Okay, and that also goes in the Nyaya Shastra and Tarka Sangraha, etc. Also, samskaras are recognized, and that is also done through inference. So, that is also another interesting thing one can refer to, but today we won't be going into that. So, now Vyasa has said that there are two types of samskaras leading to two different types of things. Also, he has referred to the nature of samskaras, where do they reside? They are one of the aparidrashta chitta dharmaha. Now he comes to Sanyama. He says, Teshu Sanyamaha Samskara Sakshat Kriyayai Samarthaha. So, Teshu Sanyamaha. So, if one does Sanyama on these samskaras, which are one of the seven aparidrashta chitta dharmas, that Sanyama is Samartha. It is capable. Capable to do what? Samskara Sakshat Kriyayai. So it is capable to bring about a sakshatkara, a direct perception, direct knowledge of the samskaras. So the sanyama on them is capable of bringing this about. Okay. Now further what? How has this led to the knowledge of previous lifetimes, etc.? Where is the Purva Jati Jnanam coming from? So far we have seen that the sanyama will lead to sakshatkara, direct perception of the samskaras. So now we have to take the next logical step. So Vyasa says, न च देशकालनिमित्तानुभवैः विना तेषाम् अस्ति साक्षात्करणम्. So if one were to do sakshatkaranam or sakshatkara, direct perception of the samskaras, he says it cannot be done without their deshakala nimitta anubhava, without knowing the desha, that is the place, region, kala, the time, nimitta, the cause, anubhava, the experience. So unless all these things are known, their sakshatkara will not happen. And therefore, when the sakshatkara of samskaras are happening, along with that, the time, place, cause, and experience that led to the samskaras are also part of that realization, part of the direct perception. And therefore, tad itham samskara sakshatkaranat purvajati jnanam utpadyate yoginaha. Now, all of this place, time, experience, reason, cause, etc., it is actually the previous experiences of previous lifetimes, etc., that led to the birth of those particular samskaras. Therefore, he says, taditham, in this manner, samskara sakshatkaranat, when the sakshatkara, direct perception of samskara happens, because it will come along with the deshakala nimittanubhava, etc., it is bound to bring about purvajati jnanam, and therefore purvajati jnanam utpadyate. Therefore, the yogi attains knowledge of all the previous lifetimes, because every samskara is associated with some place, time, experience, cause, etc. So when the sakshatkara of the samskara happens, the jnanam of that particular lifetime, that particular experience comes about, and therefore the yogi attains the siddhi mentioned in the sutra, which is the purva jati jnanam. And then Vyasa says, paratrapi evameva samskara sakshatkaranat parajati samvedanam. So paratrapi, in case of other beings as well, if the samskara sakshatkara happens or is made to bring about, then parajati samvedanam, the information of the other beings' births will also take place. So this is not necessarily only for the yogi with himself. This applies to other beings as well. So here, the Vyasa broadens the scope of this particular Sanyama and the Siddhi. And this is sort of the first part of Vyasa's Bhashya on this sutra, which brings about a fascinating understanding of the samskara itself, and particularly their two types, the division into two, and of course also how the Sanyama has led to the particular siddhi of Purva Jati Jnanam.
So we are embarking upon a very interesting topic. with the Sutra, Samskara Sakshatkaranat Purvajati Jnanam. Purvajati Jnanam. Now, those who are soaked in Adhyatmic practices, Adhyatma, Paramartha, they know that we have been unborn. We have never really taken birth. We have gone through so many incarnations. We are birthless actually. So what is our history? Now, common man who is soaked in mundanity, materiality, worldliness, doesn't bother about past lives. There is no inquiry, sense of inquiry or inquisitiveness about anything before our birth, because materialistic man thinks the life commences with the birth. So it has commenced with our birth. And that is the starting point for the commoners and those of us who are soaked in mundanity, worldliness, prapancha, samsara. So we think our birth is the starting point. But Adhyatma tells us so very often that we are unborn. We have been reincarnating, incarnations after incarnations, and we are really timeless. Retrospectively, if we look, we are timeless. Prospectively too, we are timeless. So we are timeless beings. So there is inquisitiveness about what must be before our birth. Where were we before our birth? Now, this inquiry doesn't come at all, or it has no value for those who are soaked and who are engaged in mundanity of life, worldliness of life. But this inquiry, inquisitiveness is there for a spiritual seeker, if not in the beginning, at sometimes at later point in time. So we have been existing eternally. So where were we and what were we? How were we would be a question. So this is in the minds of those who are in spiritual path. So therefore the Purvajati Jnanam becomes kind of an inner desire. It is not surfacing and bubbling up, but there is a desire within. Not that one makes a pursuit about where was I in my past life. No pursuit like that. But there is a sense of inquiry, a sense of wonder as to what we were in the time of Mahabharata, in the time of Ramayana, in the time of Satya Yoga, Treta Yoga, Dwapar Yoga, etc. So, therefore, this desire is there in spiritual seekers as to what and where and how I was in my previous incarnations. And therefore, the Purva Jati, we know by orientation to Adhyatma that we had Purva Janmas. We know that and we believe in it. Okay, I had Purva Janmas, I will be having Uttara Janmas. I will be having birth hereafter as well. So, Samskara Sakshatkaranat, by samyama on samskars happening, there is Sakshatkaranam, there is direct intuitive mystic perception of our history prior to our birth, as to where were we, from where have we come to this life, from where have we come in this life, etc. So that becomes sakshatkar, matter of intuitive perception, sakshatkaranam. So the interesting topic is being commenced, and Vyasa commences by giving us some basic ideas and information about Dvaye khalu ami samskaraha. There are two types of these samskaras. One is smriti klesha hetayo vasana rupaha. Now all our manifestations, mental manifestations, our activities, our inclinations, as you just now heard, likes and dislikes and dispositions and indispositions, inclinations and disinclinations, From where do they come? So that is one kind of samskar, one set of samskar, which gives us potentials for what we are today. And we are something and we are something not. So what is that because of which we are something and we are not something else? So those are our vasanas. And here we should understand samskar and vasana, both the terms have come in this commentary. One might tend to take samskars and vasanas are one and the same. That is not true. And vasanas have a hashtag, they have a stigma. Vasana means something bad. That is also not true. Because there are shubha vasanas, ashubha vasanas. There are shubha samskaras, there are ashubha samskaras. So they can be good and bad. We should not be tarnishing the word of vasana. Vasana will be of both kind, and that's why in our Adhyatmic literature we come across the terms and expressions such as Shubha Vasana, Ashubha Vasana. So it can be auspicious and it can be inauspicious. Now vasanas are structured over samskaras. Samskars underlie vasanas. So vasanas become visible to us because they ensue from samskaras. And therefore, the samskaras are something prior to vasanas on which vasanas are structured, and vasanas give manifestations to our vritti, our conduct, our nature, our manifestation. So, one is vasana rupa, whereby we have our personality and character. Signature condition being we have set of likes and set of dislikes, set of inclinations, set of disinclinations, set of wants and set of don't wants, set of attachments, set of aversions, etc., etc. The other kind of class of samskars are vipaka hetavo dharma dharma rupaha. So the other kind of samskars are dharma rupa. Because with every act, we do collect either dharma or adharma. And if you recall, we had discussed this distinction between papa punya and dharma when there was a sutra in karma vipaka. So dharma and papa punya. The papa punya is intellectual, intellectually can be conceived, and therefore we know this is papa and this is punya. We may be able to infer either rightly or wrongly, but we can feel that something is virtue and something is vice. Dharma is something different than that. So dharma is decided in the heart of one person, in the deep core of the heart, not in the temporal plane of mind, but in the deep mind, dharma, adharma are decided. And therefore, these dharma give rise to papa punya, sukha dukkha, and karma. The Klesha, the karma theory, or you should recall. So, some samskars are dharma rupa, adharma rupa samskaras. So these are not perceptible, these are not objects and tangible things to our psyche and consciousness. Dharma is to be known by Dharma Shastra Avalokanam, or the authorities in Dharma Shastra will tell us what is Dharma and what is Adharma. Papa Punya we can decide and we can ascertain as to what is vice and what is virtue. But Dharma is the karma recorded by the karma devatas within our hearts. They reside within us and they decide what is dharma and adharma, and they give us full phala. They give us vipaka. Dharma, dharma give rise to papa punya. Papa punya give rise to karma, karma. Karma, karma give rise to sukha dukkha. Sukha dukkha give rise to raga dvesha. Raga dvesha give rise to karma, karma. Karma, karma, dharma, dharma. So this is the wheel that we had considered. So this is second kind of samskara, dharma, dharma, rupa. Now this is not legible for us. We cannot read this. We can read our shubha vasanas and ashubha vasanas if we objectify our own consciousness. So we will know what is auspicious kind of tendency and what is ignoble kind of tendency in us. Noble tendencies and ignoble tendencies. But they are in dharma, dharma, which we have been committing from time without beginning, as we have been existing. So therefore, there are certain paridrushta dharma and aparidrushta dharma, chitta dharma, which you heard just now. But certain things can be cognized or can be deduced, can be inferred, or can be felt, can be intelligized. But certain things are aparidrushta. And these samskaras are aparidrushta. And these samskaras are at the root of our manifestation. Our manifestation is based on vasanas, and vasanas are based on samskaras. So this is a structure that we have to understand. Samskar give rise to vasanas, vasanas give rise to vritti, and vritti gives rise to karma. So this is how the structuring is there. Now, when there is samyama, say, I will give another instance how we overlook the meta aspects of our life. If there is a tree in front of you and that's a coconut tree, when somebody asks you what tree is this, you say it's a coconut tree. How much is the tree? You say from the trunk part of the tree to the shoot part of the tree. However, the tree extends under the ground in the form of roots, and the roots might spread, and they spread a lot. The tree might be in your compound, but the roots will have gone into neighbor's compound as well. But you say, this is the tree in my compound. Now, we understand botanically how the root is very, very important, because the shoot is depending upon the root. The tree is what the roots of the tree are. What the roots have, the tree will have. Now, you say the tree is in my compound, it is my tree. But the roots will have gone beyond your compound, beyond your properties. So it also would belong to the neighbor. But this we don't understand. We say, no, this is tree in my compound, and therefore the fruit should be taken by me. I will partake the fruits because the tree is in my compound. However, the fruit has come from the roots. Without roots, there would have been no tree. Without tree, there would have been no fruit. So we are quite mean-minded by being so worldly. We do not look at the root of the tree. We don't count the tree from the end of the roots, all the ends of the roots on all the four sides to shoot of the tree. But we look at from ground level onwards, the tree, and we say, this is in my compound, this is coconut tree, and therefore it will give coconut, and I will take the coconuts. So, the samskars are underlying our manifestation gross to subtle. Now, when the samskars are realized intuitive mystically in samyama, through the samyama, naturally it tells you about from where have you come and how have you come. How have you carried out your journey of transmigration to this life. So it will reveal and divulge where were you in your past life. Now the past life had its past life. That past life had its past life. So it will tell us about the desha, kala, nimitta, anubhava. All those will be replayed like you bring a movie from archives and you watch the movie. So we have an archives of our all previous existences. They are audio-visual recordings of our past lives. And in Samyama, you will get to have a replay of that, and it will tell you where were you for particular samskars. Suppose today you are a musician and you are a good musician, you should know that in the past lives you had pursuit of music. Now, that can be inferred by any Adhyatmic seeker that, oh, child prodigy or last life and last lives, few lives, this person has dedicated for music and that's why he is a maestro today. So we infer that music has been there in past lives of such a maestro. But one will not know where someone was musician, how the music was pursued in the previous life and previous lives. But samskars will give you the whole vision of it, which will tell you about desha, the region, the kala, in which period were you in your last manifestation, when you collected these particular body of samskars, and with what nimitta, what incidents that you collected these samskars, anubhava, your experiences. So this gives a peep into one's past life, giving complete picture, experience of desha, kala, nimitta, anubhava. Now in our case, we do not know where were we in our last life. Where did it take our last birth? Which region? Which country? Which place? We have no clue. Although we know that we had our past lives. We were existing somewhere in our previous life. But where? No clue. Kala, which was the time in which we had previous manifestation. Was it 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago? When were we manifest? Last as human beings. And also nimitta, incidental things. Now let me tell you that as an amusing example. We think Mahabharata has taken place some 5,300 years back. And we think that we were not there. This is not true. We were somewhere. Maybe not in Bharatavarsha, but we were somewhere when Mahabharata war was fought. But now we have no memory. Possibly we were human beings. Perhaps we heard about a great battle taking place in Kurukshetra. Perhaps we were 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 miles away. But we had the news that a terrible battle has broken in Bharatavarsha in Kurukshetra. So today we have no clue. So possibly we were human beings and therefore we had idea. Possibly we were human beings and perhaps we fought the battle. We were part of the battle as well, possible, but no clue. Or perhaps we were animals, cattle, etc. and therefore did not have idea of it, but we were there. All of us existed when Bhagwan Sri Krishna existed, Mahabharata time, when Bhagwan Sri Rama existed in Treta Yuga. But in what form we do not know. We could be in any form of life. Like we could have been trees. We could have been some of the Rakshasas who were slayed. Or maybe we were by the side of Sri Rama. We do not know. Perhaps we were in that Vanasena. We do not know. Possible, it's all possible. We were there, that means in some form we were there. So here in Sakshatkar, one really knows this today's manifestation, my character, my dispositions, my gravities, from where have they come? Last life. Where was I in my last life? It will tell us about Desha, Kala, Nimitta, Anubhava for a yogi. And that's a marvelous thing. So that's how the Sakshatkara is. And then you can understand what must be the advantage to a yogi to really get to know from where have I come in this life. What were the various journeys that I have undertaken to reach today? When I manifest today as a human being, how have I gone through? Which yonis? Where did I have my different births? Where did I get my samskar? See, if you are a musician today, maybe in last life you are not a musician, but in 2-3 lives retrospectively backwards, if you go, you are in pursuit of music, and that will tell you that 3 lives ago, 4 lives ago, you were human beings and that you pursued music, and that is how it is now fructifying, and you have disposition for music, inclination for music. So this will tell you about our history. And history should always interest a human being to know about one's own history. So that's how the Purvajati Jnanam is possible, because one is able to go to roots of manifestations today. So that will tell you where did you get these roots from, and that's why you will come to know these were gotten in previous life or previous lives. So that will give you experience that you had then, whereby you collected these samskaras, Shubha, Ashubha samskaras, and they have now manifested into vasanas, and there is a manifestation of your personality. Now this samskara sakshatkaranam is also possible with respect to another person, not just oneself. That is why the Trikala Jnanis, some of these sagely people, they tell about, they read into your life, they read into your past life, and they tell you about your past life. So it is possible to have samskar sakshatkaranam of even others. Not anyone, Tom, Dick and Harry, but someone where there is affiliation or where there is association. Yogi will be able to realize as to what was the past life. Now we are only so futuristic. We want to just think about the future. This is how the materialism is. We want to shun ourselves from the past, and we want to imagine about future. But in Adhyatma, you are told that you have endless journey, starting from time, beginningless time, and you will be also perhaps having journey to endless time, provided you don't get liberated. So it's an enormous journey that we are having. So it's not just believing in reincarnation, but we have to slightly peep into what is reincarnation, what all we could have been, and what all we might be. And this is a sense of inquiry for a spiritual seeker sometimes. Where I will be in my next life and what will I be doing in my next life. Whereas a materialistic man thinks life begins when you take a birth, life ends when you die. Once you are dead, your story is over. That is not true, because we are immortals. Therefore, we manifest, incarnate in some form, one amongst 8.4 billion yonis. There could be any kind of life form that we would be manifesting time and again. We have manifested in all the 8.4 billion yonis so far. We were mosquitoes, we were bugs, we were elephants, we were lions and tigers and cats and dogs and eagles and parrots and sparrows and crows. And we have potentiality to become once again because of our karmas. So we can once again become crow and cat and dog if we do such karmas. This is what the Karma Siddhanta tells us. Anyway, the Purva Jati Jnanam is possible because of Samskara Sakshatkaranam. This is what is to be understood. So we should have more sense of inquiry about the Samskara body within us, the Samskara cortex within us, the Samskara aspect of our manifestation. That is seed of our manifestation. Unless you have a seed, none of it. So we have seed forms, and these seeds are collected in our sojourn to present life. And yogi realizes the whole journey. He gets a review of it. How have I traveled to where I am today? The whole picturization is possible through some samskars. So that's something very interesting, considering our metaphysical status that we are eternal beings. We have been ever living, ever living. The death has been just a bubble phase, and immediately we have been reincarnating some form or the other. But the life is a continuous journey, not just from birth to death, but a continuous journey. So experiences have been collected all through these lives. We have no idea, not even a slightest clue that we had all these experiences. But Samskar Sakshatkaranam gives that wonderful picture of our journeys. So that's what this sutra is telling us. So it's a review of our journey, which is not possible for we mortals, but yogis can, and that is through samyama only. Not that yogi will be knowing otherwise. It is through samyama he comes to know. Okay.
So let us proceed in the Bhashya. So Vyasa continues, he is saying, Atra idam akyanam shruyate. Akyanam means purva vrittoktihi. It is a sort of a tale, story, kathanam, something that has happened, that being told, like an anecdote. So Vyasa proceeds with an anecdote. Atra idam akyanam shruyate. So Bhagavatah Jaigishavyasya Samskara Sakshatkaranat Dashasu Mahasargeshu Janma Parinamakramam Anupashyatah Vivekajam Jnanam Pradur Abhavat. So this is a story of Bhagavan Jaigishavya. So Jaigishavya had or attained this Sakshatkara of the Samskaras. And as a result of that, in the Dashasu Mahasargeshu, now Mahasarga, so there is this cycle of creation, and then everything gets destroyed, it gets created, and so on, that we have heard of in Puranas. We also heard in one of the Bhashyas of the Sutra, etc. So there is a Sarga and there is also the Mahasarga. Mahasarga is where the Prakriti itself withdraws back into its pradhana state, and the Prakriti's evolution begins again. So there are smaller pralayas, larger pralayas. Mahasarga is the largest, where the Prakriti goes back into its original state, and then the evolution begins again. Now, as was stated, the Purusha is ever immortal, unborn. It is known as Ajaha, unborn. So now this Bhagavan Jaigishavya, through the Sanyama and Samskaras, he got the knowledge of Dashasu Mahasargeshu Janma Parinamakramam Anupashyatah Vivekajam Jnanam Pradurabhavat. So because he had the knowledge of his Janma Parinama Krama, various lifetimes, in the 10 Mahasargas, what dawned in him was Vivekajam Jnanam. So there is a slight subtle difference between Viveka Khyati and Vivekaja Jnanam. So Viveka Khyati is about coming to know. Very briefly, there is more to be said, but it is majorly about understanding the difference between Prakriti and Purusha. And more specifically, even the very clean sattvic form of the Chitta and the Prakriti is so very different from the Purusha. Getting that realization through direct perception is known as Viveka Khyati. Now, Vivekajam Jnanam is slightly different in that it is a siddhi in which complete knowledge of each and everything comes across. Okay, that is realized. And there are statements that says the Vivekaja Jnanam may arise or not arise. However, Viveka Khyati can still or will still lead to Kaivalyam. So, Prapta Vivekaja Jnanasya, Aprapta Vivekaja Jnanasya va. So, whether the Vivekaja Jnanam has come about or it has not come about, it doesn't matter. Sattva Purusha Yoho Shuddhi Samye Kaivalyam still holds. Okay, so that has been said. So, this was a slight aside since the term Vivekaja Jnanam came in this story. Anyway, so now Jaigeshavya attained Vivekajam Jnanam because he came to know about the complete sequence of his life and lifetimes in the 10 Mahasargas. So, atha Bhagavan Avatyah Tanudharaha Tam Uvacha. So, there was another sage or great personage, Avatya, who here it says Tanudharaha, which is a reference to what is known as the Nirmanakaya Sampannaha, one who can create a certain body for himself. So Tanudharaha. Now he asked Jaigeshavya, he said, Dashasu Mahasargeshu Bhavyatvat Annabhibhuta Buddhisatvena Tvaya Narakatirya Garbha Sambhavam Dukkham Sampashyata Devam Manushyeshu Punah Punah Utpadyamanena Sukhadukkhayoho Kim Adhikam Upalabdham Iti. Now this story is not necessarily so much about the Sanyama and the knowledge of lifetime, but it is taking that as a beginning and discussing the nature of this world. Okay, and giving us very interesting insights in the form of a story. So now, Avatya asks Jaigeshavya, he says, okay, in 10 Mahasargas, you have the knowledge of all your lifetimes. And your Buddhi Sattva, the purity of your mind, has not been overpowered by Rajatama Mala. And you have not lost any knowledge or any memory of any of that. You have gone through various types of life forms, Naraka, Tiriyak, etc. Whether, let's say the demonical life forms or animal-like life forms. You have been through all of that. Then you have also been through Deva Manushya, God-like or deity-like life forms, human being-like life forms, etc. And you have seen the dukkha of the Naraka and the Tiriyak, the demonical and the animal-like life form. You have seen the dukkha. You have also seen the Sukha Dukkha of the Deva and Manushya, etc. So among all this Sukha and Dukkha that you have experienced, what was more? Was there more Sukha or was there more Dukkha? Asks Avatya. Now, Bhagavantam Avatyam Jaigeshavya Uvacha. So now, Jaigeshavya said to Avatya, he said, Dashasu Mahasargeshu Bhavyatvat Anabhibhuta Buddhisatvena Maya Naragatiryak Bhavam Dukkham Sampashyata Deva Manushyeshu Punah Punah Utpadyamanena Yatkinchit Anubhutam Tat Sarvam Dukkhameva Pratyavaimi. So he gives an interesting answer. He was asked, in these 10 Mahasargas, all these various life forms, you have seen Dukkha, Sukha, which was more? He replies, he's saying, okay, in all these 10 Mahasargas, since I was there and present, and I've been through all these life forms, and my Bodhisattva has not been overpowered by Rajatama Mala or loss of memory. I have all the information. Then, in all of this, I have seen the dukkha in the Narakatari Yag. I have been through the Deva, Manushya, etc. life forms, but over and over and over, taking births and deaths and so on. Whatever I experienced, he said, everything is dukkha only. That is what I believe. So instead of saying whether there was more sukha or more dukkha, he said everything was dukkha. So now, Avatya, he replies, Yad idam ayushmatah pradhanavashitvam anuttamam cha santosha sukham kim idamapi dukkhapakshe nikshiptam. Yes, okay, but I hear what you're saying. But of you who has you are an Ayushman, you are like a Chiranjeevi, you have knowledge of all these life forms. You also have the Pradhana Vashitvam because you have gone through the 10 Mahasargas where the Prakriti went back to its Pradhana state. And in that sense, you have control over Prakriti itself and the Pradhana itself. And you have the Anuttamam cha Santosha Sukham. In all of this, you have the completely unoverpowered Bodhisattva. You have the Santosha and you have the Anuttamam Sukham, unsurpassed joy, unsurpassed Sukha coming out of that from Pradhana Vashitvam, etc. What even this are you categorizing as Dukkha? So Kim idamapi Dukkha Pakshe Nikshiptam iti. Incidentally, this is also a reference to a previous sutra which we had seen where the Siddhi of the Niyamas was given and it was said Santoshat Anuttamam Sukhalabha. From Santosha, when the Niyama of Santosha was being discussed, the Siddhi was the Anuttama Sukha, unsurpassed joy or bliss that comes from Santosha. And here, Avatya sees that Jaigishavya clearly had that. And still he is saying everything is dukkha. So he asks, are you categorizing even that as dukkha? So now Jaigishavya, Bhagavan Jaigishavya Uvacha, Vishaya Sukhapekshaya Eva idam anuttamam santosha sukham uktam. Okay, Kaivalyapekshaya dukkhameva. So see how the level of wisdom grows, how the point of view changes. He says, okay, this what is described, the santosha sukham, was referred to as anuttamam sukham, unsurpassed joy or bliss. But that is only relative to Vishaya Sukha, from the joys coming from the senses and the objects of senses. Compared to that kind of joy, the Santosha is known as unsurpassed Anuttamam Sukham. However, he says, relative to Kaivalya, it is nothing but Dukkha. Kaivalya Apekshaya Dukkhameva. So we see that Jaigishavya is at a certain plane where even if our sutra says Anuttama Sukhalabha from the Jaigishavya's point of view, even that is Dukkhameva. So here's how in the Vibhuti Pada, as part of the discussion, there is so much exalted knowledge and insights being given to us. So Jaigishavya says, Vishaya Sukha Apekshaya Eva idam Anuttamam Santosha Sukham Uttam Kaivalya Apekshaya Dukkhameva. Buddhisattvasya ayam dharmaha trigunaha. So now he elaborates. He says, okay, this Buddhisattva that we have, by its nature it is a trigunatmakam. This is again something we saw in the first chapter, trigunatmakam chittam. It is made up of sattva, raja, tama gunas. So Buddhisattvasya ayam dharmaha trigunaha. So its very characteristic is that it is a trigunatmakam made up of three gunas. Trigunascha pratyayah heya pakshe nyastaha. So anything that is triguna and knowledge of anything that is triguna, it is in the heya paksha. It is something to be discarded. So therefore that sukha of that nature is also to be discarded. Now dukkha rupaha, he says, dukkha rupas trishna tantuhu. Trishna dukkha santanapagamat tu prasannam abhadam sarvanukulam sukham idam uktamiti. So now, while Jaigishavya said that even the anuttamam sukham of the pradhanavashitvam and the santosha, I call it dukkha, he said. Because, again, as he said, compared to Vishaya Sukha, it is an Anuttamam Sukham. But compared to Kaivalya, it is Dukkha. But now he clarifies so that people don't misunderstand him. He clarifies, he says, this Buddhi Sattva is made up of three gunas, the three gunas. The three guna pratyaya is always in the Heya Paksha, it is something to be discarded. But he says still, that statement is not invalid, that Santoshat Anuttamam Sukhalabhaha. Why? He says, the dukkha rupa essentially is the trishna tantu. It is the thread of desire, the thread of thirst. Now what happened was, with santosha, with full contentment, trishna dukkha santanapagama, there was a apagama, going away of what? The trishna dukkha santana, the going away of this thread of thirst. And whatever follows due to that. So that is the whole parampara, that is known as Trishna Dukkha Santana. All of that completely gets discarded by Santosha. And therefore he says, Prasannam Abadam Sarvanukulam Sukham Idamuktam. And therefore that is the complete Nirmala, unobstructed, suitable to everybody, that is the kind of sukham. Okay, so now he sort of says that okay, that anuttamam sukham of the santosha has its own place because of this, it's a contrary position to the trishna tantu, that is anuttamam sukham. Having said that, from a kaivalya point of view, it is still dukkha, and therefore when you asked me that from my siddhis, when you asked which was more sukha or dukkha, I said everything was dukkha. And therefore Jaigishavya gives an explanation of his standpoint, having attained so much of knowledge and realization. And from this very nice sort of a anecdote, we also learn about this whole, the realm of Prakriti and the realm of Purusha. The realm of Prakriti itself has a certain level of gradation. And even the highest of that, for compared to something that is related to Kaivalya, it will still be categorized as dukkha. So this was a nice anecdote that Vyasa placed in the bhashya of this sutra. And with this sutra and its bhashya comes to a close.
So as I was telling you that we are all birthless, we are all immortals. We were never created. We are eternal beings. He gives example which comes in Puranas. There is a dialogue which comes between Jaigishavya and Avatyacharya. And through that episode, the dialogue, we realize that we are indeed immortals. Jaigishavya says that he had his experience or he had his history of all 10 Mahasargas. Now, one Mahasarga spans daytime of Brahma of 4,320 million years and night time of Brahma of same duration, 4,320 million years. So one kalpa is 8,640 million years. That's the span of it, of which half of it is the day where the life would manifest and half of it would be at night when the life would be absorbed into Prakriti. So he says that he has history of his 10 Mahasargas, and therefore he knows his history in all those 10 Mahasargas, countless times that he must have taken birth, and he has memory of all that. During that sojourn of 10 Mahasargas, he has gone into various planes of life, such as Urdhva Loka, Janma and Mrityu Loka Janma and Naraka Janma. So infernal planes, terrestrial planes and celestial planes, he had journeyed to all these planes from being Naraka Yoni to Daiva Manusha Yoni, Manusha Yoni, Daiva Yoni. He also took birth as gods, as a celestial beings, and he remembers all those. And therefore he tells us, Avatya questions him, when did you experience the greatest pleasure? Where did you experience the greatest pleasure in all your journeys of 10 Mahasargas? And then he tells us about that, how all that, although it was pleasurable, it was dukkham, philosophically. And then he tells us about santoshat anuttama sukhalabha, which we had considered on an earlier occasion. So santosha is the greatest sukham compared to vishaya sukham. But then apart from vishaya sukham, there is atma sukham, paramartha sukham. And from point of paramartha sukham, santosha sukham is like a remote star, maybe brighter than sun, but because of remoteness, it just twinkles. So everything is actually sorrowful relatively, but the Kaivalya Sukham is absolute bliss. This is what he tells us. Anyway, point here is that Jaigi Shavya had his scanned report of all manifestations in 10 Mahasargas. How many lives he must have taken in the span of 432 million years in each sarga. And I recall here Bhagavad Gita 4th chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna that, Arjuna, whatever message I am giving you, whatever knowledge I am giving you, I had given this knowledge earlier to Vivaswan, that is very sun. So Arjuna says, you are of my times, and how come you say that you gave this advice to sun, which almost seems to be timeless? The sun is the most ancient thing for us. And how do you say that you taught sun, Vivaswan? So Krishna tells him, Arjuna, I had countless lives until today. You had countless lives too until today. I remember each of my lives. You don't remember even one. Apart from being Arjuna, as Kaunteya, you do not remember anything as your past manifestation. But I remember vividly, clearly all my manifestations. And therefore, I am emphatically saying I had given same instruction, what is called Karma Yoga. I had taught this to Vivaswan, which was passed on to Manu, and then Ikshvaku. So, Krishna speaks about his countless lives, which he remembered clearly. Arjuna also had those many lives, but remembered none. This is what is our fate. And here Jaigi Shavya is telling about his experiences. He is recounting to Avatya all those manifestations in 10 Mahasargas. How did he manifest? In what form he manifested? What kind of experiences he had? He experienced all kinds of pains and pleasures, all degrees of pains and pleasures. Naturally, the question was, which was the greatest pleasure that you had so far? And then he tells us about this, that there is something called as Vishaya Sukha, there is something called as Santosha Sukha, and there is something called as Kaivalya Sukham. And Kaivalya Sukham is only essentially, quintessentially bliss. Others are all only relative pleasures, relative happinesses. So also the Upanishads speak about Bhuma Sukham. In Chandogya Upanishad, Bhuma Sukham, the greatest bliss is Moksha Sukham, is Swarupa Sukham, to be in oneself. Nothing will go beyond that bliss. Subjectivistic bliss within oneself is the infinitude of bliss. And in front of that, everything else is not only not bliss, it is sorrow. Bhuma sukham vai sukham. And rest, everything is not even sukham, it is all sorrows. This is what Jaigeshavya is telling our dear. So it is to just tell us that we had countless lives. None of that is remembered. We can't remember, not even slightest clue that we existed in past life. But little Samskar study will tell us, yes, this is not from this life. This has come from my previous life. So little inquisitiveness will tell us about that all that we have procured is not from the present life, but from past lives, and therefore there will be little inquisitiveness about the past existences. And that's the samskar. So with that, this commentary on the sutra ends. It's a fascinating sutra for Adhyatma Sadhaka, Paramartha Sadhaka. Okay.
Let us recite the shlokas on Guruji and stop for today. Vajñānikam pravakritva āsaneshu kalavinam yogābhyāse ca tatvajñam vandeham sundaram gurum yogaruksho yokesmin yat preranena vardita yogācārya guro tubhyam sundarāya namo namaha. Thank you.
Namaskar all of you.